On the surface, Dania Harper's life looked exactly like the kind people envied in quiet American suburbs. Steady job, warm home, a wife who smiled in holiday photos, and a daughter who still held his hand crossing the street. But some nights carried sounds that didn't belong. A door closing too quickly upstairs, a whisper through the wall, a shadow moving where no one should be. And then, one evening, his 7-year-old daughter looked up at him with innocent confusion and asked the question that would fracture everything he believed about his marriage. If stories about love, betrayal, and the quiet secrets hidden behind ordinary doors speak to you, stay a little longer. Some truths only reveal themselves to those willing to listen until the end. The Harper house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, where the lawns were trimmed evenly and the evening air always smelled faintly of wet grass and pine. In late October, the sun dropped behind the trees earlier than usual, leaving the neighborhood washed in soft amber streetlight. Dania Harper leaned against the wooden fence in his backyard, tightening the last loose board with a cordless drill. The repetitive hum filled the quiet space, blending with the distant sound of cars moving along Interstate 5. Inside the house, lights glowed warmly through the kitchen window. A normal evening, the kind that made life feel stable. He wiped his hands on his jeans and stepped inside through the back door. The scent of roasted chicken drifted from the oven. A pot simmered quietly on the stove. "Lily," he called. A small voice answered from the living room. "In here, Dad." Dania walked in to find his daughter lying on the carpet with colored pencils scattered around her notebook. She looked up with the wide, thoughtful eyes that often reminded him how much children noticed, even when adults assumed they didn't. "You finished your homework?" he asked. "Almost." He ruffled her hair gently before heading toward the sink to wash his hands. Upstairs, the door closed. Daniel glanced toward the staircase. "Mom home?" he asked casually. Lily nodded without looking up from her drawing. "She's in a room." Daniel dried his hands slowly. Olivia had been working from home most days lately, juggling freelance marketing clients and Zoom meetings. Sometimes she shut the bedroom door for calls. Perfectly normal. Still, something about the quiet upstairs felt strange. He pushed the thought away. "Hey," he said lightly, crouching beside Lily. "What are you drawing?" "A house," she said, "but I messed up the windows." He studied the page. It was their house, 2 floors, a little tree in the yard, stick figures in front. 3 figures. "Looks pretty good to me," Daniel said. Lily hesitated. Her pencil hovered over the paper, unmoving. Then she looked up. "Dad?" "Yeah?" Her voice lowered slightly, like she wasn't sure if she should say the words out loud. "Who is that man in Mom's room?" For a moment, Daniel didn't react. The sentence hung quietly in the room. "What man?" he asked, careful to keep his tone calm. "The man that came out of her room earlier." Daniel blinked once. "Earlier when?" "When you were outside, fixing the fence." His mind moved quickly through possibilities. A delivery person? A neighbor? A contractor? "Did Mom say who he was?" Daniel asked. Lily shook her head. "He was tall," she said thoughtfully, "and he had a black coat. He walked really fast when he left." Daniel felt something shift inside his chest, subtle but undeniable. "Did he talk to you?" "No." "Did Mom see you?" Lily shrugged. Daniel looked toward the staircase again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Upstairs, Olivia's bedroom door remained closed. He forced a small smile for his daughter. "Probably just someone Mom works with," he said, but Lily still looked uncertain. "I don't think so," she said softly. Daniel stood slowly. "Why not?" She glanced down at her drawing, then back at him. "Because they looked like they were arguing." The word landed heavier than it should have. Daniel's heart began to beat just a little faster. From upstairs, faint footsteps crossed the bedroom floor, and suddenly the house that had felt so familiar only minutes ago seemed filled with invisible spaces Daniel had never noticed before. Secrets behind doors he had never thought to open. The next morning arrived like any other weekday in the Harper house. Coffee brewing in the kitchen, the low murmur of morning news drifting from the television, and the quiet rhythm of a family preparing for the day. But something invisible had shifted. Daniel noticed it the moment he woke up. Olivia was already out of bed. That alone wasn't unusual. She often woke early for client calls across different time zones. Yet when Daniel stepped into the kitchen, the first thing he saw was Olivia standing by the window with her phone pressed close to her chest. The screen went dark the second she noticed him. "Morning," she said lightly, setting the phone face down on the counter. Daniel poured himself coffee. "Morning." Her voice sounded normal. Her smile looked normal. Everything about the moment felt normal. Except Daniel now understood how easily normal could hide things. Lily's question from the night before lingered in his mind like a quiet echo. Who is that man in Mom's room? He stirred sugar into his coffee and glanced casually at Olivia. "Busy morning?" "Just emails," she replied. Daniel nodded. Olivia moved around the kitchen with her usual efficiency, checking Lily's lunchbox, adjusting the thermostat, glancing briefly at her watch. But Daniel noticed small details he might have ignored before. Her phone stayed within reach. Always. When Lily ran upstairs to grab her backpack, Daniel spoke casually. "You've got a lot of client work lately." Olivia shrugged slightly. "Freelance life. Some weeks are crazy, some weeks are quiet. Anyone local?" "A few." She kept her eyes on the coffee mug in her hands. Daniel leaned against the counter. "Anyone I'd know?" Olivia finally looked up. A tiny pause. Then she smiled again. "Daniel," she said gently, "you barely know the people I used to work with at the agency. Why would you know my clients?" He nodded, accepting the logic. But the pause had been real. Lily thundered down the stairs seconds later, breaking the tension. "Bus is coming." The morning rushed forward again. Shoes, backpacks, hurried hugs at the front door. Daniel stood beside Olivia on the porch as Lily climbed onto the school bus. For a moment they watched the bus disappear around the corner. The suburban street looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Daniel slipped his hands into his jacket pockets. "You working from home today?" "Most of the day," Olivia said. "Most?" "I've got a meeting downtown this afternoon." "With?" She hesitated just long enough for Daniel to notice. "A client." Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay." Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Olivia turned toward the door. "You're going to be late for work." He checked his watch. She was right. "Yeah." But as he walked toward his car, Daniel felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Suspicion. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet enough to follow him everywhere. The financial office where Daniel worked overlooked Elliott Bay, its glass windows reflecting the pale Seattle sky. Normally, he enjoyed the calm precision of spreadsheets, forecasts, and predictable numbers. Today, his focus drifted. His phone sat on the desk beside him. He almost texted Olivia twice. Both times he stopped himself. What would I even ask? Around noon, his coworker Mark leaned over the cubicle wall. "Lunch?" Daniel blinked. "Yeah, sure." They walked to a cafe across the street, the kind filled with tech workers and quiet laptop conversations. Halfway through his sandwich, Mark noticed Daniel staring at his phone. "You look like you're waiting for bad news," Mark said. Daniel forced a small smile. "Just tired." "Marriage tired or work tired?" Daniel laughed softly. "Is there a difference?" Mark raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. Still, as they left the cafe, Daniel found himself checking the time again. 2 p.m., Olivia's meeting. Without thinking, he opened Instagram. Olivia rarely posted during workdays, but her profile appeared the same as always. Family photos, weekend hikes, Lily's birthday cake. A perfect life, carefully framed. Daniel stared at the screen for a moment longer before locking his phone. That evening, Olivia returned home later than usual. Daniel was helping Lily with math homework when he heard the front door open. "Hey," Olivia called from the hallway. Her voice sounded tired. But when Daniel walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, he noticed the faintest hint of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air. Not his. Olivia set her purse on the counter. "How was work?" she asked casually. "Normal." She nodded. "Meeting went long?" "Yeah," she said. "Client wanted to go over campaign strategy." Daniel studied her expression carefully. "Successful?" Olivia met his gaze. "Hopefully." Silence settled between them again. Not hostile, but careful, as if both of them were suddenly aware of something fragile standing between them. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel walked past the bedroom and saw Olivia sitting on the edge of the bed. Her phone glowed softly in the dark room. She was smiling at something on the screen. Then she noticed him. The smile disappeared instantly. "Everything okay?" he asked. Olivia locked the phone and set it down. "Yeah," she said quietly. Daniel stood there for a moment longer. For the first time in years, he realized something unsettling. He no longer knew what his wife was thinking. And somewhere, inside the quiet spaces of their marriage, something had already begun to change. The rain arrived overnight. By morning, Seattle's sky had turned the pale gray color Daniel associated with long days and quiet thoughts. Drops slid slowly down the kitchen window as he stood at the counter pouring coffee. Upstairs, the shower ran. Olivia was getting ready for another meeting. Daniel glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m. Lily sat at the table eating cereal, swinging her legs beneath a chair. "Dad," she said suddenly. "Yeah? Are you mad at Mom?" Daniel looked at her. "No," he said carefully. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "You both talk quieter now." The observation was simple. Too simple. Daniel forced a small smile. "Grown-up stuff," he said. "Nothing for you to worry about." Lily nodded, accepting the explanation the way children often do when they sense adults aren't ready to tell the whole truth. The shower upstairs stopped. A few minutes later, Olivia walked into the kitchen, dressed for the day, dark coat, heels, her hair still slightly damp. "Morning," she said. Daniel watched her move through the kitchen with familiar ease, rubbing toast, checking her phone, glancing briefly at Lily's backpack. Yet the phone never left her hand for long. "Busy day?" Daniel asked. "2 client calls," she replied. She slipped the phone into her purse. For a brief second the screen lit up before disappearing. Daniel caught only a fragment of a notification. A name, Ethan. Just that. No last name. But something about the way Olivia quickly tugged the phone away made Daniel's stomach tighten. The moment came later that afternoon. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a small accident. Daniel had come home early from work to pick up Lily before a dentist appointment. Olivia's car wasn't in the driveway yet, which meant she was probably still downtown. The house was quiet. While Lily searched upstairs for her favorite sweater, Daniel set his keys on the kitchen counter. That was when he saw Olivia's tablet. She must have forgotten it on the dining table. Normally, Daniel wouldn't have touched it, but the screen lit up with a soft notification sound. A message. The preview appealed before the device locked again, and this time the name was impossible to ignore. Ethan Ward. Daniel's chest tightened. The name sat there in quiet digital certainty. For several seconds he simply stared at the screen. Then, slowly, he picked up the tablet. The device wasn't locked. The message thread opened with a single tap. Daniel told himself he was just checking something practical, a work conversation, a client discussion. But the first message he read made his throat go dry. "Ethan, did you make it home okay?" Olivia's reply appeared beneath it. "Olivia, yes." Daniel was still outside fixing the fence. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. His eyes moved quickly down the screen. "Ethan, that was close." "Olivia, too close." A pause between messages, then another. "Ethan, I miss you already." Daniel's hand tightened around the tablet. The next message took longer to appear. Olivia had written it hours later. "Olivia, you shouldn't." Another pause, then Ethan again. "Ethan, but I do." Daniel stopped scrolling. His heartbeat filled his ears. The messages weren't explicit. There were no obvious confessions, no declarations of love, but the tone carried something unmistakable, an intimacy that didn't belong in a professional conversation. He looked back at the earlier messages, days of exchanges, short sentences, private jokes, moments where the conversation drifted away from work. One message caught his attention. "Ethan, same time Thursday?" Olivia's response came several minutes later. "Olivia, I'll try." Daniel set the tablet down slowly. His hands felt strangely cold. From upstairs, Lily called down. "Dad, found it." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, just long enough to steady himself. When he opened them again, the quiet house felt different. Not broken. Not yet. But something fragile had cracked. And now Daniel finally knew the name of the man standing somewhere inside the silence of his marriage. Ethan Ward. The rain continued through most of the week, turning the streets of Seattle into long ribbons of reflected light. Cars moved slowly along the wet pavement, while office towers glowed in the early darkness of winter evenings. Inside a quiet cafe near Pioneer Square, Olivia Harper sat across from Ethan Ward. At first glance, they looked like any two professionals meeting after work, laptops closed, coffee cups half finished, coats draped over the backs of chairs. But neither of them had opened their laptops in the last 20 minutes. Ethan leaned back slightly, watching her. "You're distracted tonight," he said. Olivia traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger. "Just tired." Ethan gave a quiet smile. "That's the third time you've said that this week." She didn't answer immediately. Outside, rain tapped softly against the cafe window. "I think Daniel suspects something," she finally said. Ethan's expression shifted, not panic, but alertness. "What makes you think that?" "He's watching me more," Olivia said, "asking small questions." "About me?" "No, not directly." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's nothing." Olivia looked up at him. "You don't know Daniel." There was a pause. "What's he like?" Ethan asked. For a moment, Olivia seemed unsure how to answer. "Responsible," she said finally. "Careful. The kind of person who plans everything." "That doesn't sound terrible." "It isn't." Another pause followed, heavier this time. "But it's also quiet," Olivia added softly. Ethan waited. After Lily was born, Olivia continued, everything became schedules. Work, school pickups, bills, grocery lists. That's marriage. Maybe. She looked out the window again. But sometimes it feels like we stop talking about anything real. Ethan didn't interrupt. Olivia exhaled slowly. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. Ethan's voice was gentle. "Neither did I." Their eyes met. The silence between them carried something unspoken, something that had been building slowly over months of meetings, messages, and conversations that had drifted beyond business. Olivia finally stood. "I should go." Ethan nodded. "Same time Thursday?" he asked quietly. She hesitated only a moment. Maybe. Across the city, Daniel sat alone in his parked car outside a small office building in South Lake Union. The rain had slowed to a thin mist. Through the windshield he watched the entrance of Ward Technologies. The company name glowed in clean white letters beside the glass doors. Daniel had spent 2 days researching Ethan Ward. It hadn't been difficult. Tech founder, 36 years old. Articles about venture funding, interviews in startup magazines, a carefully polished LinkedIn profile. Smart, ambitious, successful. Exactly the kind of man Olivia might meet through work. Daniel leaned back in his seat. His phone screen glowed softly in the dim car. On it were screenshots, messages, calendar entries. Not enough to prove everything, but enough to raise questions. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the uncertainty. The messages he had seen on the tablet lived somewhere between friendship and betrayal. Close enough to hurt, but vague enough to doubt. Daniel stared at the building entrance. Employees exited in small groups, laughing quietly as they hurried toward the parking garage. He wondered if Ethan Ward was among them, and if so, whether that man knew he was slowly dismantling someone else's life. Later that night, Daniel sat in the living room while Olivia folded laundry on the couch beside him. The television played softly in the background. Lily had already gone to bed. Long day? Olivia asked. Yeah, she nodded. Mine too. Daniel watched her hands fold a small sweater. Precise, calm. How's the new client? He asked casually. Olivia didn't look up. Busy. Important project? Pretty big. Daniel let a few seconds pass. Who's the client again? Olivia paused, just slightly. A tech company. Name? This time she looked at him. For the briefest moment, something flickered across her face. War Technologies, she said. Daniel nodded slowly. I think I've heard of them. Another silence stretched between them. Not loud, not confrontational, but heavy with things neither of them were ready to say. Across the room, Olivia's phone buzzed quietly on the coffee table. She reached for it instinctively. Her eyes flicked down to the screen. Then she quickly flipped the phone over. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. But he said nothing, because somewhere in the quiet space between them, both of them understood something dangerous had already begun, and neither one knew how far it would go. Saturday mornings in the Harper house usually followed the same gentle rhythm. Pancakes, coffee, Lily watching cartoons while Daniel skimmed through news on his tablet. Olivia answering the occasional work email between bites of breakfast. But this Saturday morning felt different. Not dramatically different, just quieter. The air between Daniel and Olivia had grown careful over the past few days, like two people walking across a frozen lake, each step measured, listening for cracks beneath their feet. Lily sat cross-legged on the living room floor, watching a movie, while Daniel washed dishes in the kitchen. Olivia scrolled through her phone at the dining table, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. Hey, Lily suddenly called out. Yeah, Daniel answered. There's Mom's work guy. Daniel turned. On the television screen, the movie had ended, replaced by the local Seattle morning news. A segment about tech startups filled the screen. Behind the anchor, a headline appeared. War Technologies announces new expansion. And standing beside the anchor in a recorded interview was a man Daniel recognized instantly from the photos he had studied online. Tall, dark coat, calm confidence. Ethan Ward. Olivia froze. For a split second, her face lost all color. Lily pointed excitedly. That's the man I saw, she said. The one who came out of Mom's room. The room fell completely silent. Daniel slowly turned his head toward Olivia. Her eyes were still locked on the television. Ethan's voice continued casually through the speakers. We're expanding our marketing strategy over the next year. Daniel muted the television. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Lily looked between them. Did I say something wrong? Daniel forced his voice to remain calm. Sweetheart, can you go play in your room for a bit? She hesitated, sensing the tension she didn't fully understand. Okay. Her footsteps faded upstairs. The moment she disappeared, the quiet in the house shifted. Daniel looked at Olivia. So, he said softly. Olivia didn't answer. You want to explain that? She exhaled slowly. You went through my messages. It wasn't a question. Daniel gave a small, humorless laugh. That's what you're worried about right now? You invaded my privacy. You brought another man into our house. Olivia's head snapped toward him. You don't know that. Lily saw him. She's 7. She recognized his face instantly. The words hung between them. Olivia stood abruptly and walked toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass. Daniel watched her carefully. How long? He asked quietly. She didn't turn around. It's not what you think. Daniel let out a breath. That sentence is never followed by good news. Olivia finally faced him. Nothing happened that day. Daniel studied her. Not that day? Her jaw tightened. You're twisting my words. Am I? The tension in the room thickened. Daniel, she said slowly. This started as work. That's not what those messages look like. Her eyes flashed. You were reading private conversations. You were hiding them. For a reason. Daniel's voice sharpened. Exactly. The argument paused there, both of them standing on opposite sides of the kitchen, like strangers who had accidentally wandered into each other's lives. Finally, Olivia spoke again, her voice lower now. You want the truth? Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. She crossed her arms. The truth is that for years, Daniel, you stopped seeing me. The words landed harder than he expected. That's not fair, isn't it? Olivia's voice trembled slightly, not with anger, but with something deeper. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about Lily, bills, or schedules? Daniel didn't answer. When was the last time you asked me if I was happy? I thought you were. You assumed. Her voice cracked slightly, and eventually, someone else actually asked. Daniel felt something twist painfully inside his chest. So this is my fault. I didn't say that, but you're implying it. Olivia looked down at the floor. I didn't plan for this to happen. Daniel shook his head slowly. People say that like accidents just fall out of the sky. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the windows. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Daniel asked a question that had been building inside him since the moment Lily spoke earlier that week. Are you in love with him? Olivia's silence answered before her words did. I don't know, she said quietly. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second, because somehow that answer hurt even more than a simple yes. Upstairs, Lily's laughter drifted faintly down the hallway as she played with her toys, unaware that something inside her parents' marriage had just cracked wide open. And neither Daniel nor Olivia knew how to put it back together. 3 days after the argument, the Harper house fell into a strange routine of silence. Not the peaceful kind, the careful kind. Daniel woke early each morning, made coffee, helped Lily get ready for school, and left for work with the same quiet politeness he might show a distant co-worker. Olivia moved through the house just as carefully, speaking only when necessary, avoiding long eye contact. Neither of them had mentioned Ethan again, but the name lingered everywhere, like smoke that refused to clear. Thursday afternoon, Daniel sat in his office overlooking Elliott Bay, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to make sense. His phone buzzed on the desk, a news notification. He almost ignored it, but one phrase caught his eye. War technologies under investigation. Daniel frowned and opened the article. The story unfolded quickly. Anonymous internal complaints, questions about investor transparency, allegations that the company had exaggerated growth numbers during its latest funding round. At the center of the article was a photo. Ethan Ward standing in front of reporters outside his office building. The same calm expression Daniel had seen on television. But the headline beneath it told a different story. Tech startup faces federal inquiry. Daniel leaned back slowly in his chair. His first thought wasn't about the business scandal. It was about Olivia. Because if she had been working closely with Ethan, her name might eventually appear in the story too. That evening, Daniel arrived home earlier than usual. The front door opened onto a house filled with tension. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, several tabs glowing on the screen. News articles, emails, messages. She didn't notice Daniel at first. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled. You've seen it, Daniel said quietly. Olivia looked up. Her face looked pale. Yeah. Daniel stepped into the kitchen. How bad is it? She closed the laptop halfway. Bad enough. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Were you involved? No. The answer came quickly, firm, but fear lingered in her eyes. I worked on marketing strategy, she explained. Campaign messaging, brand positioning, nothing financial. But your name could still appear. Olivia nodded. That's what I'm afraid of. Daniel watched her carefully. For the first time since the confrontation days earlier, Olivia didn't look defensive. She looked scared. My biggest client just emailed, she said quietly. They're suspending our contract until this clears. Daniel leaned back. That fast? That's how reputation works, she said bitterly. The kitchen grew quiet. From the living room, Lily's cartoons played softly. Daniel folded his hands together. Does Ethan know about the investigation? Olivia hesitated. Yes. You've talked to him? Yes. Daniel studied her face. How's he handling it? Trying to control the damage. Is he worried? Olivia let out a tired breath. He should be. Daniel looked down at the table for a moment. Are you still seeing him? The question landed heavily between them. Olivia didn't answer immediately. No, she said finally. Not because of me. Her eyes met his, because everything is falling apart. Daniel nodded slowly. At least she was honest. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky beyond the kitchen window had turned the deep blue of early evening. Olivia rubbed her temples. I didn't think it would go this far, she murmured. Daniel's voice was quiet but steady. Things rarely do. Another long silence followed. Finally, Olivia looked up again. Are you leaving me? The question sounded almost fragile. Daniel hadn't expected her to ask it so directly. He leaned back in the chair, thinking carefully. I don't know, he said. The truth felt heavier than anger. Olivia looked down at her hands. I never wanted to hurt Lily. That part isn't optional anymore, Daniel said softly. The words weren't cruel, just factual. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked as Lily moved around her room. Daniel listened to the sound. Then he stood. I'm taking her to soccer practice tomorrow, he said. You should come if you want. Olivia nodded faintly. I will. Daniel paused before leaving the kitchen. For a moment he looked at his wife, the woman he had built 12 years of life with, now sitting in a quiet kitchen, surrounded by headlines that might destroy both her career and their marriage. He realized something then. The affair had been the crack, but this public collapse of Ethan's world, was the moment everything would truly begin to unravel. Because secrets were easier to hide before the world started asking questions. And now, the world was paying attention. The sky above Seattle cleared for the first time in nearly a week. Sunlight spread across the Harper backyard on Sunday morning, touching the damp grass and the wooden fence Daniel had repaired only days before. The same fence he had been fixing the afternoon Lily first asked her question. It felt like months ago. Daniel stood alone on the patio holding a mug of coffee, watching the quiet neighborhood slowly wake up. A neighbor walked his dog. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower started. Inside the house, Lily was still asleep. Olivia sat at the kitchen table. They hadn't spoken much since the news about Ethan's company broke. Not because they were avoiding the conversation anymore, but because both of them seemed to know the next conversation might decide everything. Daniel stepped back inside. Olivia looked up. Her eyes were tired but calm, as if she had spent the entire night thinking about what she needed to say. "Can we talk?" she asked. Daniel sat across from her. "I think we have to." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them was no longer sharp like an argument. It was heavier now, like standing at the edge of something final. Daniel folded his hands on the table. "I spoke to a lawyer yesterday," he said. Olivia didn't flinch. "About divorce?" "Yes." The word landed softly but firmly. She nodded once, absorbing it. "That makes sense." Daniel studied her expression. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not." Another silence passed. Finally, Daniel asked the question that had been lingering since their last confrontation. "Why him?" Olivia stared at the table for a long moment before answering. It wasn't just him. Daniel frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" She exhaled slowly. "Ethan didn't appear out of nowhere and ruin our marriage." Daniel's voice stayed calm. "So explain it to me." Olivia looked up. "When Lily was born, everything changed. Not just our schedules, our lives. That's normal." "Yes, but we never adjusted." Daniel listened carefully. "You focused on stability," she continued. "Work, bills, making sure everything ran smoothly. I thought that's what we both wanted. At first, it was." Her voice softened, but somewhere along the way, we stopped being partners. Daniel leaned back slightly. "We raised a child together, yes, and that's important," Olivia said. "But it also became the only thing we did together." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but stopped, because part of him knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Olivia continued quietly. "You stopped asking about my work, my ideas, my frustrations. I trusted you to handle your career. That's not the same as caring about it." The words weren't angry, they were sad. Daniel rubbed his hands together slowly. "And Ethan did care." Olivia nodded. "At first it was just conversations, brainstorming marketing ideas, talking about projects. And then?" She hesitated. "And then he started asking me questions no one had asked in years." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Like what?" "Whether I was happy." The simplicity of the answer hurt more than Daniel expected. "You could have talked to me," he said. "I tried." "When?" "Every time I hinted that something felt missing, you said we were just busy." Daniel looked away. The memory surfaced clearly. Late nights, short conversations, promises to talk later that never happened. "I didn't realize how serious it was," he said quietly. "I didn't either," Olivia admitted. Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't cry. "That's the worst part." Daniel looked back at her. "I never planned to fall for someone else." "But you did." "Yes." The honesty in her voice was almost painful. "But it wasn't just about him," she continued softly. "It was about the version of myself I had forgotten." Daniel let the words settle. "So where does that leave us?" Olivia shook her head slightly. "I don't know." The house remained quiet around them. Sunlight moved slowly across the kitchen floor. Finally, Daniel stood and walked to the window. Outside, the world looked normal. Cars passed, children rode bikes, life continued. Behind him, Olivia spoke again. "If you want to divorce me, I won't fight it." Daniel didn't turn around immediately. For the first time since everything began, he realized the decision was entirely his. Anger would be easier, final, but the truth was more complicated. He still loved the woman sitting behind him, even if she had broken something between them. Daniel finally turned back toward the table. His voice was steady. "I'm not ready to decide today." Olivia looked up. "Then what do we do?" Daniel thought for a moment. "We tell the truth," he said. "To each other?" "Yes. And if the truth isn't enough?" Daniel held her gaze. "Then at least we'll know we didn't keep hiding from it." The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Not like the end of something, more like the moment before a final decision that would change both their lives forever. 6 months later, the Harper house looked almost the same from the outside. The same trimmed lawn, the same white mailbox at the end of the driveway, the same maple tree in the front yard that had begun turning red with the arrival of autumn. But inside, everything had changed. Daniel no longer lived there. He now rented a modest two-bedroom apartment 15 minutes away in a quiet building overlooking Lake Washington. It wasn't large, and the furniture felt temporary in places, but it had slowly begun to feel like a home, especially on the weekends when Lily stayed with him. That Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the apartment windows while Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, building a tower of wooden blocks. "Dad," she said suddenly. "Yeah? Your tower is leaning." Daniel looked down at the uneven structure he had been distractedly stacking. "You're right." He carefully adjusted one block. "Better?" Lily nodded with approval. Children adapted faster than adults. Daniel had learned that over the past months. Lily had asked difficult questions at first about why Dad lived somewhere else, about why Mom didn't come to soccer games together anymore. But children also accepted simple truths. Sometimes families changed. Across town, Olivia was rebuilding her own life. The investigation into war technologies had exploded into weeks of headlines. Investors pulled funding. Federal auditors stepped in. Ethan Ward's carefully policed reputation collapsed almost overnight. Olivia's name never appeared in the official inquiry, but the damage to her professional reputation still lingered. Clients hesitated. Emails went unanswered. She had eventually taken a contract with a smaller marketing firm, less glamorous, less public, but stable enough to start again. Sometimes, late at night, she would scroll through old photos on her phone. Family vacations. Lily's first day of school. A picture Daniel had taken years earlier at a beach in Oregon. Olivia laughing at something he had said, wind tangled in her hair. Back then, neither of them had imagined how fragile ordinary happiness could be. Daniel stood on his apartment balcony later that evening, watching the sun sink behind the city skyline. The air carried the cool edge of approaching winter. Inside, Lily had fallen asleep on the couch during a movie. Daniel stepped quietly back into the living room and draped a blanket over her. Her breathing was slow and steady. For a moment, he simply watched her. Children deserved a world that felt safe, even when adults failed to protect it perfectly. His phone buzzed softly in his pocket. A message from Olivia. "Olivia, did Lily have a good day?" Daniel typed a reply. "Daniel, she built a tower taller than mine." A few seconds passed. Then Olivia responded. "Olivia, that sounds like her." Daniel stared at the screen for a moment. The conversations now were simple, careful, focused entirely on Lily. No anger, no intimacy either. Just two people learning how to exist in the quiet aftermath of something they had once believed would last forever. He set the phone down and walked back to the balcony. The city lights flickered on across Seattle. Daniel rested his hands on the railing and thought about the moment everything had started. The innocent question Lily asked one evening in the living room. "Dad, who is that man in Mom's room?" At the time, Daniel had believed that discovering the truth would be the hardest part. He had been wrong. The hardest part came afterward. Learning how to rebuild a life when the story you believed in had already ended. Learning how to forgive not necessarily the other person, but the version of yourself who didn't see the cracks forming sooner. And learning that sometimes love didn't disappear when a marriage ended. It simply changed shape. Inside the apartment, Lily stirred slightly in her sleep. Daniel closed the balcony door and turned off the lights. Tomorrow morning, they would make pancakes. Life, he realized, didn't pause after betrayal. It kept moving forward quietly, patiently waiting for you to decide how to move with it. And maybe, someday, that quiet would feel less like loss and more like peace.